The wind blew hard through the broken metal walls of the old alien outpost. Dust swirled in the air, and every step echoed like a ghost's whisper. Jack, a human scavenger, moved carefully through the wreckage. His boots crunched over glass and bone. He had been here before, but never this deep. He wasn't looking for treasure. Not this time. He needed food, maybe old batteries, anything to trade for supplies. But something strange stopped him, a sound, very soft, like a cry. Not the sound of a machine or an animal. It sounded like a child. Jack froze. He turned off his flashlight and listened. The sound came again. A small voice, weak and afraid. It wasn't crying now. It was talking, whispering. "Can I have a dad now, please?" Jack's eyes narrowed. He followed the sound, moving deeper into the shadows of the ruined structure. The walls here were scorched from war. Alien symbols marked the doorways. He stepped over a rusted pipe, ducked under a hanging wire, and stopped at a sealed metal gate. It was half broken. He used his crowbar to force it open and slipped inside. What he saw made his heart stop. A cage, made of dark steel. Inside it, a little alien girl with light purple skin and glowing violet eyes sat on the floor. She looked no older than 6 or 7. Her hands were tied with wire, and her thin arms were covered in bruises. Beside her lay a woman, maybe her mother, unconscious, breathing weakly. Her skin was the same color, but older, tired, and cold. The girl looked up at him, her eyes wide. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply whispered again, her voice shaking. "Can I have a dad now, please?" Jack dropped to his knees. What are you doing in here?" he asked softly. She didn't answer. She didn't seem to understand all his words. But she reached through the bars and touched his hand. It was small and trembling. Something inside Jack shifted. He had seen a lot of terrible things across the galaxy, but never a child like this, caged like an animal, abandoned in a ruin. He pulled out his tools and started breaking the lock. The girl watched him silently. The woman beside her stirred a little, but didn't wake up. It took 2 minutes. The lock broke, and Jack pulled open the cage door. The girl stood, but her legs were weak. She fell forward. He caught her gently. "I'm not going to hurt you," he whispered. "I promise." She nodded slowly. Jack stepped into the cage and lifted the mother onto his back. She was light, far too light for an adult, starved. "You both need help," he muttered. He wrapped the girl in his old jacket and picked up his pack. But as he turned to leave, a light blinked red above the gate. Jack's stomach dropped. He had triggered an alarm. The ruins began to shake, and lights flickered in the walls. Somewhere, deep inside, a machine voice spoke in a strange alien language. It was calling someone. "Stay close to me," Jack said. The girl grabbed his hand tightly. They ran. Jack raced through the broken halls with the mother on his back and the girl by his side. Behind them, heavy doors opened and mechanical sounds echoed. Something was coming. Jack didn't stop. They reached the surface. The sun was low, red and angry. Jack's truck was parked behind a sand dune. He opened the door and gently placed the mother on the back seat. The girl climbed in after her. Jack jumped into the driver's seat and started the engine. The ground shook. In his mirror, he saw a strange silver drone rise into the air behind the ruins. It turned toward them. Jack pressed the pedal hard. The truck roared across the sand, kicking up dust behind them. The drone followed, scanning them. Jack opened the glove box, pulled out his old blaster, and handed it to the girl. She held it with both hands, confused. "If anything tries to take you again," he said, "you point that and scream for me." She nodded, her eyes wide and serious. Jack looked ahead. He didn't know who these two were. He didn't know why someone caged them. But he knew one thing. He couldn't walk away. He would protect them, whatever it cost. *, the desert wind slammed. hard against the windshield as Jack drove the old truck across the endless sand dunes. The little alien girl sat beside him, silent, her hands holding the blaster tightly like he told her. Her eyes never left the mirror, watching the ruins grow smaller. Behind them, in the back seat, the alien woman, her mother, lay still, her breathing slow and uneven. Jack's heart beat fast, but his hand stayed steady on the wheel. The drone was no longer in sight, but he knew that didn't mean they were safe. Whoever caged them must be rich, powerful, and angry. He had seen slavers before, back when he worked security on mining colonies. They didn't forgive, and they never let go of their property. He looked at the girl. She was so small, so quiet. She didn't cry. She didn't ask questions. She just watched. Jack took a sharp turn down into a dried riverbed. The truck bounced and the engine groaned, but it held. He knew a safe place nearby, an old storm shelter buried deep underground, built long ago when the planet still had rain. They reached the rocks and Jack jumped out. He pulled open a hatch covered in sand and motioned for the girl. She grabbed his hand without fear. He helped her down the ladder first, then climbed down with the mother on his back. The shelter was cold and dark, but dry and safe. Jack turned on a lantern. The soft yellow light filled the small room. There were blankets, some canned food, and an old water tank. He laid the woman down and checked her pulse, still alive but very weak. The girl looked around, then sat near her mother and placed a hand on her forehead. She closed her eyes and hummed a soft melody. Jack sat against the wall and watched. This was no ordinary family. They didn't act like victims. They had a strange calm, a strange sadness, like they had seen this too many times. He opened a can of fruit and handed it to the girl. She looked at it, sniffed, then passed it to her mother. She didn't eat, not even a bite. Only when her mother took a small spoonful did the girl finally eat one piece herself. Jack rubbed his forehead and sighed. Why was he doing this? He didn't know them. He didn't even know their names, yet something about that whisper in the cage stayed in his mind. Can I have a dad now, please? It didn't sound like begging. It sounded like hope. He cleared his throat and spoke softly. What's your name? The girl looked at him, then spoke. Lyra. And her? He pointed to the mother. Zara. Lyra repeated quietly. Zara, Mama. Jack nodded. Jack. I'm not your dad, but I'm not leaving you either. Lyra tilted her head, then gave a small nod. The shelter's warning system blinked red. Something was moving on the surface. Jack stood and grabbed his old rifle from the wall. He pressed the monitor. A figure appeared in the dusty camera feed, tall, armored, scanning the area with a sleek device. He didn't know if it was a bounty hunter or one of the slavers' drones in disguise. Either way, they had found the truck. He turned to Lyra. We have to move again. She stood up immediately and gently shook her mother. Zara opened her eyes, barely able to move. Jack packed fast. He gave Lyra a blanket and tied another on Zara's shoulders. He helped them climb out and hid them behind a boulder, while he disabled the truck's tracker. Then they walked across the sand, step by step, hour after hour. No talking, no crying, only wind and silence. At sunset, they reached Jack's old hideout, a cave built into a cliff hidden by thorny trees. He had used it long ago when the planet was still at war. Inside were supplies, water, and a communication device buried under rock. They settled inside. Jack built a small fire. Lyra sat beside her mother, who was now breathing a little easier that night. As the fire crackled, Lyra crawled to Jack's side and curled up near his coat. She didn't speak. She just leaned against his arm and slowly closed her eyes. Jack didn't move. He stared at the flames, thinking about what came next. Whoever owned them would come again, and next time they wouldn't just send a drone. They would bring weapons. They would bring soldiers. Jack wasn't ready for a war, but he was ready to protect them. Lyra whispered in her sleep. Dad. Jack looked down. He didn't correct her. He just stayed there, watching the fire, holding the rifle close, and listening to the quiet breath of a child who believed he would never leave. Morning came with red skies and dry winds as Jack sat at the edge of the cave holding his old rifle close. The fire had died hours ago, but the warmth still stayed in the stone. Behind him, the alien woman Zara slept beside her daughter Lyra, both wrapped in thin blankets from Jack's pack. He had not slept. He could not sleep. Something inside him felt heavy, like a storm was coming. He stood and walked to the small stream behind the cave, filling a bottle with water, then washing his face in silence. The water was cold, sharp, and fresh. He drank deep and looked at his reflection in the surface. Lines around his eyes deeper than before. Gray hair starting to show around the edges. He had no family, no wife, no kids. And yet here he was watching over an alien mother and child like they were his own. Lyra woke first, rubbing her eyes and walking toward him, barefoot and quiet. She held out a small wildflower in her hand. Jack took it and smiled weakly. She pointed to the sky where strange birds circled high. He nodded but said nothing. Zara woke soon after, her body still weak, but her eyes clear now. She looked around then at Jack and spoke in broken words. "Where is this safe place, hide place?" Jack nodded again. "Yes, safe for now." Zara held her daughter's hand and sat down slowly, her voice low but strong. "You save us." Why? Jack sat across from her, thinking carefully before answering. "Because you were trapped and scared. Because no one else would." Zara looked down and said something in her own language. Lyra touched her arm and whispered softly. Jack knew he was hearing a name. Not his, someone else's. A man, maybe someone they lost. He asked quietly, "Who took you?" Zara raised her head slowly and spoke the word like it burned her throat. Vrel Syndicate. Jack's heart sank. Vrel Syndicate was not just a slaver group. It was one of the largest shadow networks in this part of the galaxy. They traded in lives across many systems. They had ships, contacts, bounty hunters, spies, and worse. If they were hunting Zara and Lyra, this was bigger than he thought. Why them?" Jack asked again. Zara pulled back her sleeve and showed him a mark on her skin, glowing faintly with silver lines. It looked like a symbol, an ancient one. Jack didn't recognize it, but something about it made his skin crawl. She pointed to Lyra, then back to herself. "Blood, old blood, royal blood." Jack stared at them. "Royalty? From where? What planet? What throne?" Zara shook her head slowly. "No throne now. No home. Gone." Jack leaned back against the wall. He had not rescued just a mother and child. He had rescued fugitives from a fallen kingdom, blood worth more than gold. And now the Syndicate wanted them back, because they were not just slaves. They were keys to something powerful, something hidden. A sharp beep from Jack's old comm unit snapped him out of thought. He ran to the corner and pulled the device from under the rock. The screen blinked with static, then a voice broke through. "Attention all scavengers, reward posted by Vrel Syndicate. 2 fugitives escaped from Outpost 63, alien female, adult, and child. Last seen with human male near Drylands, Sector 12. 1,000 credits, alive, 500 dead." Jack's blood went cold. They were already spreading the word. Every hunter, thief, and desperate wanderer in this region would be looking for them. He turned to Zara, who had heard it all. She didn't speak. She only held Lyra close, her eyes full of fear. "We have to move," Jack said. "Now I know a place far from here." "Old friend, Hidden Valley." No signal reached. Zara nodded slowly and stood with effort. Jack helped her pack. He gave Lyra food and told her to keep quiet, stay close, never run. As they stepped out into the sun, Jack saw movement on the ridge. 2 small bikes, fast and quiet, heading straight toward the cave. He grabbed his rifle and pointed. Zara and Lyra ducked behind rocks. Shots rang through the air as the bikes fired energy blasts. Jack returned fire, hitting one bike's engine and sending it crashing down the slope. The other turned sharply and fled. They didn't wait. They ran through the canyon, Jack leading them through narrow paths and jagged rocks. He had traveled this land for years. Now every path, every turn, every stone mattered. Hours passed. The sun began to fall behind the mountains. Finally they reached a deep valley where trees grew and a small cabin stood near a spring. Jack led them inside, locked the door, and fell to his knees. Zara leaned against the wall, breathing hard. Lyra sat beside Jack and placed her hand on his shoulder. They had made it for now, but the hunt was only beginning, and the price on their heads had just changed everything. Asterisk. The night was cold in the Hidden Valley, and the stars above shone like fireflies. Trapped in a dark ocean, inside the small wooden cabin, Jack sat awake, holding his rifle across his lap, his eyes fixed on the old door. Zara slept against the wall, her breathing calm. Now her strength returning little by little, Lyra curled beside her, wrapped in 2 blankets, her tiny arms wrapped around a stuffed cloth that Jack had given her. The silence was peaceful, but it was the kind of silence that never lasted. Long Jack stood up and stepped outside his boots, pressing into the soft dirt. He looked around the valley, the trees standing tall and quiet, the spring bubbling gently nearby. This place had always been safe for him, but now he was not alone. Now he had 2 lives to protect, 2 lives that did not belong to this world. And someone out there wanted them back. As the sun rose, Jack gathered food from storage. He boiled water, added dried meat, and made soup. He woke Zara and offered her the warm bowl. She smiled weakly and whispered a soft thank you. Lyra sat beside him and ate slowly, watching him with wide eyes that seemed to see through everything. After breakfast, Jack opened an old wooden chest in the corner of the cabin. Inside were tools, spare ammo, a broken communicator, and a dusty datapad. He charged the pad and searched for updates. What he found made his chest tighten. The reward had doubled, 2,000 credits, alive 1,000, if proof of death. Now there was a picture. His picture. Someone had captured an image of him leaving the outpost with Lyra and Zara. Now his face was on every bounty board across the sector. He turned off the pad and stared at the wall. They would come. Not just bounty hunters, not just drones, but worse, the kind of people who hunted for fun, the kind who didn't care who lived or died. That afternoon, Jack trained Lyra to hide when he gave the signal. He showed Zara the old escape tunnel behind the cabin, leading to the woods. He placed packs of food and water there. He buried weapons in the dirt just outside the back door. He was not waiting to be caught unprepared. As the sky turned orange and purple, the sound of engines reached his ears. Slow, steady, not like a hunter. A single hovercar approached from the far side of the valley. Jack raised his rifle and stepped out of the cabin. He saw the sleek black vehicle glide toward him, its lights off, its movement careful. It stopped 20 feet away. Tall figure stepped out. He was not armored. He wore smooth robes with golden threads and a long cape that flowed behind him. His skin was gray, his eyes glowing blue, and a jeweled ring on his hand shimmered with strange symbols. Smiled as he walked forward, his voice smooth like honey. Human man. No need for fear, I come to talk. Jack kept his rifle, raised his finger near the trigger. Who are you? Figure bowed slightly. I am Vera's. I represent the buyer, and I am here to take back what belongs to my master. Jack stepped closer, his eyes locked on Vera's. They are not things. They do not belong to anyone. Vera's chuckled and looked up at the stars. Everything has a price, even kindness, even freedom. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small cube. He tossed it toward Jack. The cube projected a hologram of Jack's old home back on Earth. His cabin, his tools, his ship. Vera's spoke again. You walk away now. We give you a new ship, a new life, and a bag of gold. No one will chase you. No one will harm you. Jack looked down at the hologram, then back at the cabin behind him. Saw a soft shadow through the window. Lyra watching him, her hand pressed to the glass. He threw the cube to the ground and crushed it under his boot. No deal. Vera sighed and stepped back. Then you choose war. And war has no mercy. He raised his hand and tapped a button on his wrist. 2 silver drones shot out of the trees and hovered above the cabin. Jack fired first. One drone fell, sparking and twitching. The other dodged and fired a beam that scorched the cabin roof. Zara grabbed Lyra and ran to the tunnel as Jack had taught them. He fell back to the door, firing shot after shot. As Vera's vanished behind smoke, the ground shook with explosions. Fire lit up the trees. The peaceful valley was no longer silent. Jack fought with everything he had. He was no hero, no soldier, just a man with a gun and a reason to fight. As the cabin burned behind him, he ran to the tunnel and slid inside. Lyra cried, but Jack held her close, his voice steady. We are not done yet. They will come again, but they will never take you, never while I breathe. Smoke rose from the burning cabin as the night swallowed the valley. The sky glowed red from the fire, and the stars above looked down like silent watchers. Jack held Lyra in one arm and kept his rifle close in the other. Zara limped beside him, her Body weak but her spirit strong. They moved through the tunnel as fast as they could, the ground shaking from blasts behind them. Tunnel ended deep in the woods behind the valley. Jack had built it long ago, never knowing it would save lives one day. They came out near the old hunter's shed, a place hidden under moss and rock. He helped Zara inside and laid Lyra on a blanket. The little girl did not cry. She only clutched Jack's coat and whispered his name over and over like a prayer. Jack closed the door and looked through a small crack in the wood. The valley was now crawling with lights. Drones floated like silent insects, scanning every tree, every shadow. Verez had not come to negotiate. He had come to take. Zara sat up and pulled a metal piece from her coat. It was small, old, but full of markings. She placed it in Jack's hand and whispered, "This is why they want us. This is what they hunt." Jack studied it. It looked like a broken piece of a star map. The center glowed faintly, showing coordinates and ancient writing. Zara explained in short, broken words, "Our people once ruled a world of light. That world is gone, but this piece leads to what remains." Jack understood now. They were not just survivors, they were carriers of something powerful, something sacred, and the Vrel Syndicate would burn 100 planets to get. Ive stood up and checked his rifle. One charge left, no grenades, no backup. Still, he would not run. He turned to Lyra and spoke slowly, "No matter what happens, stay with your mother. Do not leave this shed unless I come back. Promise me." Lyra nodded, her eyes wide but brave. He opened the trapdoor behind the shed and crawled out into the woods. The ground was wet, the trees thick and dark. He moved without sound, his eyes sharp, his breath steady. He saw them near the cabin, 4 mercenaries in dark armor, rifles ready, helmets glowing. They were scanning tracks, checking heat signatures. Jack climbed a tree and waited. When the first one passed below, he jumped and drove his blade into the neck joint. The man fell without a sound. Jack took the weapon and crouched behind a rock. He fired at the second, hitting his leg. Before the third could react, Jack rolled and shot again. Only one remained. This one turned and threw a charge. The blast shook the trees, and Jack flew backward. His side burned, and his arm went numb. He crawled behind a fallen log, breathing hard. The last mercenary stepped forward, rifle raised. A sudden flash of blue light hit the mercenary in the chest. He dropped instantly. Jack looked up in shock. Zara stood above the log, her hand holding the small hidden blaster. She helped Jack up, her hands shaking. He tried to speak, but she only placed her finger on his lips and smiled. "Family protects family." They returned to the shed where Lyra waited quietly. She ran to Jack and hugged him tight. He fell to his knees and held her close, feeling her heartbeat match his own. Zara sat beside them, the map piece glowing in her hand. Night grew quiet again, but not peaceful. They knew Verez would not stop. The reward was still out there, and the truth was now too big to hide. Jack looked at the stars and made a choice. They could not run forever. They had to find what the map pointed to. They had to end the hunt by revealing the truth. He stood up and loaded the stolen rifle. "We go to the coordinates, we find the truth, and we show them that this family will not break." Zara nodded, her eyes strong. Lyra grabbed his hand and smiled. For the first time since the cage, they walked out of the shed and into the forest. Not as strangers, not as prey, but as a family ready to fight for their future. The forest air was cool and soft as Jack walked with Lyra on his shoulders and Zara close behind. The stars above seemed to guide their path through the tall trees and silver grass. For the first time since the ruins, the wind did not carry smoke or fear, only the sound of footsteps and the quiet hum of the glowing map piece in Zara's hand. They had walked for many hours across rocky hills and down narrow paths where the roots of old trees reached from the earth like fingers. Jack had not spoken much, but Lyra had begun to ask small questions. "Why are leaves green? Do stars ever fall? Did you always live alone?" He answered every question with a small smile and short words. Lyra listened carefully, as if every word he said held meaning. Zara watched in silence, her face tired, but peaceful, as if something heavy inside her was starting to lift. They reached a wide clearing where a broken satellite dish stood tall and empty, like the bones of a giant. Jack stopped and set Lyra down. "This is where the signal points," he said, while looking at the glowing marks on the old star map. Zara stepped forward and placed the map piece into the center of the dish. The symbols flashed, then a new light rose from the dish and created a map in the sky. Above them, it showed a world hidden in mist with tall towers and rivers of light. Zara whispered the name of her home in her language and touched her heart. Lyra copied her mother, then looked at Jack and touched his chest. "You saved us," she said softly. "Mama says you fight like one of our own. You guard us like a starfather. Can I call you that?" Jack blinked and looked at her. His throat tightened. He tried to speak, but no words came. He knelt down and placed his hands on her shoulders. "If you want to, then, yes, you can." Lyra smiled and hugged him. Zara turned away and wiped her eyes. Jack stood up and looked at the map again. It pointed to a mountain deep in the north, where the air was thin and few dared to go. That is where the last signal came from. That is where the truth waited. He knew reaching it would not be easy. They camped near the dish that night. Zara prepared a small fire using dry leaves, while Jack fixed a blanket shelter for Lyra. She lay close to the fire, watching the stars through the holes in the fabric. Jack sat beside her, holding his old rifle across his lap. "Do you think we will be safe there?" she asked. Jack looked at the sky, then at her. "I think it is not about safe anymore. It is about right. It is about truth. And truth needs to live like you do." Lyra placed her small hand over his and closed her eyes. He stayed awake all night, listening to the wind and watching the fire. Morning came fast. They packed what little they had and followed the new path the map had shown. Days passed. Cold rain fell once, and strong winds pushed them back. But they kept walking. They shared food in silence. They held each other when the forest grew loud with strange sounds. One evening, Jack saw lights in the distance. He stopped and motioned for them to hide. He climbed a tall tree and used his old scope to see a camp of bounty hunters stood near the mountain pass. They wore dark gear and carried heavy weapons. One of them held a fresh poster showing Lyra's face. Jack climbed down and told Zara. She did not flinch. She held Lyra's hand tighter and nodded. "We keep moving," she said. "We do not stop." Jack knew a secret path through the cliffs. They followed him across narrow ledges and behind tall rocks. The wind screamed and the cold bit their skin, but Lyra never let go of his hand, not even once. On the fifth night, they reached a stone door built into the side of the mountain. The door matched the markings on the star map. Zara stepped forward and placed her palm against the stone. The door opened with a soft sound and warm light filled the cave beyond. Inside were old machines and a single message left in a forgotten voice, a voice that welcomed the lost, a voice that said the bloodline must survive, and the world must remember. Zara stood tall and spoke her name. She declared her daughter as heir. Jack stood beside them, holding Lyra close. She looked up at him and whispered again, "I called you Starfather before, but can I call you Dad now?" "Just Dad." Jack looked into her eyes and nodded, his voice low but steady. "Yes, you can." Lyra hugged him tight. Zara placed a hand on both of them and smiled. They were no longer running. They were walking toward something greater together. The light inside the mountain glowed like morning sun through golden mist as Jack stepped deeper into the ancient chamber, with Lyra holding his hand and Zara walking at his side. The air was warm and calm, filled with a soft hum from old machines that had not moved in centuries. Symbols lit the walls, and the stone under their feet pulsed gently as if the mountain itself welcomed them. They passed through a long hallway where stone statues stood on each side, each one shaped like figures with eyes like Lyra's and robes like Zara's. Zara paused at one statue and bowed her head, her fingers tracing the shape of a crest carved into its chest. Lyra copied her movements, then looked back at Jack, her voice low and clear. "These are my people," she said, "but I do not know them." Jack knelt beside her and touched the stone gently. "You will know them now, and they will know you, because you are alive. And that matters more than anything." Zara smiled and led them forward into a round room where a giant star map floated in the air. At the center of the map was a single blinking light. It marked the planet they stood on. Around it, the rest of the galaxy stretched wide, and Dark Zara spoke to the console in her language. The machine responded with a slow echo of her words. Then a small panel opened and revealed a crystal glowing with the same light as the map piece she had carried all this time. "This is the key," she said, "to knowledge, to peace, to memory." Jack watched as she placed it into the map core. The lights shifted. The blinking dot turned solid. The machines came alive far away on other worlds. Old satellites began to blink. Long-forgotten data started to move. The bloodline signal was active once more. The truth of her people would not be erased, but the light also brought eyes far above the planet. A single ship turned toward the mountain. Veras sat in the command chair, watching the signal appear on his screen. He smiled without joy and gave the order to descend. Jack stood near the door of the chamber, rifle in hand, senses sharp. He knew they had little time. The fight was not done. But something inside him had changed. He was no longer protecting strangers. He was standing with his family. He turned to Zara and spoke. "We need to leave before they arrive, but we cannot run forever." Zara nodded, handed him a small metal disc. "This will erase the signal when you press it. It will hide the path again. We will carry the truth inside us." Instead, Lyra took Jack's hand and looked up. "I do not want to hide forever, but I want to live with you. With Mama." Together, Jack lifted her into his arms and kissed her forehead. "You will live, and I will keep you safe. That is a promise." They left the chamber and walked back through the tunnel behind them. The lights dimmed and the doors closed quietly. The mountain had given them its gift. Now it was their turn to protect it outside. The wind howled and the sky above grew darker. Veras's ship hovered low near the forest. Troops began to drop on the hills with scanners and weapons ready. Jack led his family through the rocks down an old mining trail he remembered from years ago. They moved fast, but not in fear. They moved with purpose. At the edge of the forest they reached a small clearing where an old scout ship waited under camouflage netting. Jack had hidden it long ago and forgotten about it. Now it would carry them to safety. He helped Zara aboard and placed Lyra in the front seat. He turned to take one last look at the mountains, then pressed the disc in his hand. The signal vanished. Vera stood on the ridge, watching the screens go blank. He cursed under his breath and slammed his fist on the console. The prey had escaped again, but something told him they were not prey anymore. The scout ship rose into the sky and flew west toward the free stars. Inside, Jack sat with Lyra on his lap inside him. The stars stretched wide ahead of them like a road without end. Lyra leaned against his chest, her voice soft and clear. "When we find a home, can we plant trees? Can I have a swing? Can we name the house?" Jack smiled and wrapped his arms around her. "Yes, you can have trees and a swing and anything you want." Zara rested her head on his shoulder and whispered, "You gave us hope. Now let us give you a family." Jack looked ahead at the stars. No longer alone, no longer running. This was not the end. This was a beginning, a real one for all of them together.